The taxi slowed near the far end of the airport terminal, where the lights were dimmer and the concrete columns cast long shadows across the pavement. I reached for the door handle, ready to step out into the cold midnight air, when I heard the sharp click of the locks engaging. Before I could react, the driver spoke, his voice tight with panic. "Don't get out here. Trust me, please." My heart slammed against my ribs. I froze, my fingers still wrapped around the handle. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice already shaking. "Unlock the door." He didn't turn around. His hands clenched the steering wheel so hard his knuckles looked pale, even in the low light. "In 5 minutes," he said, barely above a whisper, "you'll understand." 5 minutes felt like a lifetime. I thought I had made the worst mistake of my life, getting into a stranger's car at midnight. My mind raced through every horror story I had ever heard. I was trapped in the back seat, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts, torn between screaming for help and staying perfectly still. Then the world outside exploded into red and blue light. Sirens wailed as 3 police cars screeched to a halt around us, blocking every possible exit. I screamed, convinced they were here for the driver, convinced I had narrowly escaped a kidnapping. But instead of aiming their weapons at the car, the officers ran past us and tackled a man standing exactly where I had been about to step out. He went down hard, a knife skidding across the pavement beside him. If I had opened that door even a minute earlier, I would not be alive to tell this story. To understand how I ended up in that car at midnight, you have to go back a few hours earlier, to a night that began with nothing more dramatic than paperwork and family obligations. My name is Sarah Monroe. I am 35 years old, and I have lived in Atlanta my entire life. Until that night, I believed my biggest problems were grief and responsibility. My mother had passed away less than a year earlier, leaving behind a complicated inheritance that included several pieces of real estate and a small family business she had built from the ground up. As the older daughter, I had taken on the role of managing the loose ends, meeting with lawyers, organizing documents, and trying to keep everything together while my younger sister Lily mourned in her own way. That evening, I was packing for an early morning flight. I had a meeting scheduled out of state with one of my mother's longtime attorneys, someone she trusted implicitly, to finalize a few remaining details about the inheritance. I was tired, emotionally drained, and eager to get it over with so I could finally breathe again. I thought I had everything ready until my phone rang. It was Lily. Her name lit up my screen, and I answered without hesitation. Lily had always been the softer one, the emotional one. Even as adults, she still leaned on me the way she had when we were kids. "Sarah," she said, her voice tight with worry, "I just realized something. You still have the original authorization forms, right?" I frowned and glanced at the folder on my desk. "Yes. Why?" "I think you should bring them with you tonight," she said quickly. "I know your flight isn't until early morning, but if anything happens, if they get lost or delayed, it could complicate everything." Her concern seemed reasonable. Paperwork had already caused enough delays. "I was planning to put them in my carry-on," I said. There was a pause, then she added softly, "I just don't feel comfortable with anyone else handling them. Please, bring them yourself. And don't tell anyone you're going to the airport tonight. It's late. I don't want you worrying Mom's old friends." I remember smiling at that, touched by how protective she sounded. "You worry too much," I told her. "I'll be fine." Before we hung up, I heard another voice in the background. Marcus. Marcus was Lily's fiancé, the man she planned to marry in a few months. He had joined our family not long after our mother's death, stepping into the role of supportive partner with surprising ease. He was calm, polite, and always seemed eager to help. "Everything okay?" he asked through the phone. "Yeah," I replied, "just logistics." "Well," he said, his tone careful, "better safe than sorry. Those documents are important." That was all. Nothing unusual, nothing threatening. I had no reason to doubt either of them. Because I don't drive at night if I can avoid it, I ordered a taxi. The app showed the driver's name as Cole. He arrived within minutes, a black sedan pulling up quietly in front of my house. I grabbed my coat, tucked the folder securely into my bag, and locked the door behind me, unaware that I was stepping into the most dangerous night of my life. The ride was silent from the start. Cole was a middle-aged man with a steady posture and a serious face. He didn't turn on the radio or attempt small talk. I told myself he was just tired. Still, I noticed the way he checked the rearview mirror more often than necessary, his eyes flicking between the road behind us and my reflection in the glass. About halfway to the airport, he asked a question that made my stomach tighten. "Did anyone know you were coming here tonight?" I hesitated, then answered honestly. "My sister." He nodded once, his jaw tightening, but he didn't say anything else. By the time we reached the airport, it was close to midnight. The terminal was quieter than usual, with fewer cars and long stretches of empty curb. Instead of pulling up near the brightly lit main entrance, Cole drove past it and slowed near a darker section at the far end. That was when he locked the doors. After the police tackled the man on the pavement, everything happened at once. Officers shouted commands. Someone secured the knife and another item that made my skin crawl when I realized what it was. A cloth soaked in something chemical and sharp-smelling. I stayed frozen in the back seat, my entire body trembling. One of the officers approached the driver's side and spoke to Cole with familiarity and respect. That alone confused me. When the officer nodded and stepped away, Cole finally turned around to face me. "It's okay now," he said gently. "You're safe." I stared at him, my fear shifting into disbelief. "What is going on?" I demanded. "Who was that man? Why did you lock me in the car?" He took a slow breath. "Because your mother asked me to protect you." Those words hit me harder than any threat. "My mother is dead," I whispered. "I know," he replied. "My name is Cole. I was her head of security for years. Before she passed, she made me promise that if anything ever felt wrong, I would watch over you. Tonight felt very wrong." My head spun as the pieces refused to fit together. "You're telling me she thought someone would try to hurt me?" "She didn't know when," he said carefully. "But she suspected who." The police finished their work quickly. The man who had been arrested was taken away in handcuffs. An officer briefly explained that he had been waiting for a specific target and had enough on him to justify serious charges. They would contact me later with more details. As the police cars pulled away, the airport returned to its eerie quiet. I sat there staring out the window, replaying the last few hours in my mind. Lily's call, her insistence that I come alone. Marcus's calm agreement. The question Cole had asked in the car. A terrible realization began to form, one I didn't want to accept. Cole drove me away from the terminal without asking where I wanted to go. I didn't protest. I couldn't. My voice felt locked inside my chest. If that man had gotten me, I finally managed, what would have happened? "He would have made it look like an accident," Cole said. "That's what he was paid to do." Paid. The word echoed in my head, cold and heavy. "By who?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, "The person who hired him knew your schedule, knew you would be alone, knew exactly where you would step out of the car." I closed my eyes, my hands shaking in my lap. I thought of my sister's voice, full of concern. I thought of Marcus's measured tone, his questions about documents and meetings. I wanted to scream at myself for even considering the possibility, but my instincts were already screaming louder. When we reached my street, Cole stopped a short distance from my house. "For now," he said, "you need to act like nothing happened. Whoever is behind this believes their plan failed because of bad luck, not because you know the truth." I nodded slowly, understanding the danger of the moment. "And if I pretend?" I asked. "Then you stay alive long enough to find the truth," he replied. As I stepped out of the car, the house I had lived in for years suddenly felt unfamiliar, unsafe. I unlocked the door and went inside, moving quietly as if someone might already be watching. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Lily. "Did you make it safely? I was so worried about you." I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing my reply. Yes, I'm home now. Everything's fine. I hit send, set my phone down, and leaned against the door as it closed behind me. In that moment, I understood something with terrifying clarity. The danger in my life had not come from a stranger in the dark. It had come from the people I trusted most. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the house, replaying Lily's voice in my head over and over again. Her concern, her insistence. The way she had said my name like she always did, soft and trusting, as if the world were still simple, and we were still girls sharing secrets under the same roof. By morning my body felt heavy, but my mind was sharp in a way it had never been before. Growing up, Lily had always been my shadow. I was 4 years older, tall for my age, loud when she was shy, stubborn when she cried easily. When kids teased her at school, I stood between her and the world. When our father died suddenly, it was me who learned how to swallow fear and become steady. Lily clung to my arm at the funeral, her small fingers digging into my sleeve, and I promised myself I would never let anything happen to her. That promise shaped my entire adult life. I turned down a job opportunity in another state because Lily didn't want to be alone. I stayed in Atlanta when I could have left, because family mattered. When Mom's health began to fail, Lily leaned on me again, emotionally fragile, overwhelmed by hospitals and paperwork. I became the organizer, the decision-maker, the one who handled doctors, bills, and lawyers. Lily trusted me with everything. Or at least, that's what I believed. Our mother, Margaret Monroe, was not an easy woman. She was strong, demanding, and fiercely independent. She built her real estate portfolio from nothing, buying rundown properties and turning them into steady income. She taught us early that security didn't come from luck, but from planning. Still, even she softened around Lily. I used to tease that Lily had inherited Mom's heart while I had inherited her backbone. In the months before Mom died, she called me into her bedroom one evening, her voice thin but her eyes still sharp. She asked about Lily, about Marcus, about whether I trusted them. "Of course I do," I had said, confused. "They're family." Mom had studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Just remember," she said quietly, "love doesn't always come with loyalty." At the time, I dismissed it as paranoia born from illness. Now those words echoed like a warning I had ignored. Marcus entered our lives not long after Mom passed. He was everything Lily needed, or so it seemed. Calm where she was emotional, confident where she hesitated. He spoke well, dressed neatly, and knew how to make people feel at ease. When Lily introduced him, she looked happier than I had seen her in months. I wanted that for her. I welcomed him without reservation. Marcus asked questions about the properties, about the business, about legal structures and taxes. I assumed it was curiosity or concern for Lily's future. When he praised me for handling everything so responsibly, I felt proud, not suspicious. I had nothing to hide, and I thought neither did he. After Mom's death, the inheritance process became complicated. The will outlined the assets, but not the final distribution. Mom had wanted time, wanted me to oversee things until Lily felt ready. That meant everything passed through my hands. Lily often said she was grateful. "I trust you," she told me more than once. "You always do what's right." That trust was the foundation of my world. The morning after the airport incident, Lily came over early. She didn't call first. I heard her knock, quick and insistent, and my stomach tightened before I even reached the door. When I opened it, she threw her arms around me, holding on longer than usual. Her embrace felt desperate, not relieved. "I was so scared," she whispered. "When you didn't answer last night, I thought something terrible had happened." I forced myself to relax, to soften my posture, to play the role she expected. "My phone died," I lied easily. "I got home late and crashed." She pulled back just enough to look at my face, her eyes scanning me, searching for something. "The airport was okay?" Yes, I said. Quiet. Behind her, Marcus stood in the driveway, hands in his pockets. He smiled when our eyes met, but it didn't reach his eyes. Long night, he said. Glad you're safe. Safe. The word felt strange in my ears. Inside, Lily hovered, offering tea, fussing over me as if I were made of glass. Marcus asked about my trip, about whether I still planned to see the lawyer. His questions came one after another, carefully phrased but relentless. I answered vaguely, keeping my tone light, my expression calm. When they finally left, I sank onto the couch, my heart pounding. Nothing overt had happened, no accusations, no threats. And yet the air between us had changed. I felt like I was standing on thin ice, every step requiring careful balance. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. A text from Lily. I'm sorry if I was pushy last night. I just worry about you. You're all I have left. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to cry. Another part wanted to scream. Instead, I typed back what she expected. I know. I love you too. As the day wore on, memories I had never questioned before resurfaced with new clarity. Lily asking about life insurance, just out of curiosity. Marcus wanting to know what would happen to the properties if something happened to me. At the time, I had laughed it off, telling myself they were just thinking ahead. That night, Cole called. Any changes in behavior? He asked. They're being attentive, I replied. Too attentive. That's consistent, he said. They don't know what went wrong at the airport. They're checking to see if you suspect anything. I swallowed hard. Do you think my mother knew this would happen? There was a pause. I think she knew it was possible, he said carefully. That's why she kept certain things vague, and why she kept me close. When the call ended, I sat alone in the dark, the house quiet around me. I felt torn in two. One part of me wanted to confront Lily, demand answers, force the truth into the open. The other part understood with terrifying clarity that doing so could get me killed. Family doesn't betray family, I told myself. I had believed that my whole life. But the truth was already pressing in, undeniable and cold. The danger I faced wasn't random, it wasn't bad luck, it was intentional, personal. Later that evening, another message came through. Did you eat? Lily asked. You've been under so much stress lately. I smiled bitterly at the screen. Concern, wrapped in care, layered over something darker. I realized then that the most dangerous lies weren't the obvious ones. They were the ones spoken with love. I typed back a reassuring reply, keeping my tone warm, my words gentle. On the surface, nothing had changed. Underneath, everything had. As I set my phone down, a single thought settled into my mind, heavy and irreversible. If the threat in my life wasn't a stranger, then it had to be someone close enough to touch, and that meant I could no longer afford to be just a sister. I went back to the airport alone the next afternoon, not because I needed to, but because I couldn't stop thinking about the place where everything had almost ended. The terminal looked completely different in daylight. Families dragged suitcases across the polished floor. Business travelers talked loudly on their phones. Coffee machines hissed and beeped. If I hadn't known what had happened there less than 24 hours earlier, I would have believed it was just another ordinary place, harmless and forgettable. I stood near the far end of the arrivals curb, close to the concrete column where Cole had stopped the car. In the sunlight it looked unremarkable. No bloodstains, no police tape, no sign that a man with a knife had waited there for me to step out and disappear forever. I wrapped my arms around myself and breathed slowly. This was where I could have died. This was where someone had decided my life was worth less than a signature on a piece of paper. My phone vibrated in my hand. Cole. I didn't expect you to come back here, he said when I answered. I needed to see it, I replied. I needed to know it was real. It was real, he said quietly. And it's not over. That was what scared me the most. The attack at the airport hadn't been a moment of madness. It had been planned, organized. Someone had invested time and money into making sure I wouldn't walk away alive. "Whoever hired that man," I said, keeping my voice low, "knew exactly where I would be. They knew I don't drive at night. They knew I'd order a taxi." "Yes," Cole said. "They also knew your flight time, and they chose a spot with minimal cameras." My stomach twisted. "So what happens now?" "Now," he said, "you act like nothing changed. You don't accuse anyone. You don't confront anyone. You watch, and you listen." I closed my eyes. Watching and listening sounded simple, but it meant sitting across from my sister at dinner, smiling while wondering if she had already decided how I would die. When I got home, Lily was waiting in the kitchen. She was chopping vegetables with exaggerated care, as if concentrating too hard on an ordinary task. "You're back early," she said, glancing up. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I replied. "Just needed some air." She smiled, but her eyes lingered on my face, searching. "Marcus will be home late," she added. "Work stuff." "Of course," I said. We cooked together in silence, the rhythmic sound of the knife against the cutting board filling the space between us. Every so often Lily would ask an innocent question. How was I sleeping? Whether the lawyer meeting went well? If I was still planning to travel again soon? Each question felt like a probe, gentle but deliberate. That night, after Lily went upstairs, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. Cole had warned me not to act yet, but something inside me refused to stay passive. If my life was in danger, I needed more than instincts and fear. I needed proof. I remembered the way Marcus always carried his leather messenger bag. He never left it unattended. Not at home, not in the car. He took it with him even when he walked the dog. At the time, I had thought it was a professional habit. Now it felt like a vault. The next day, I watched more closely. Marcus talked easily, laughed at the right moments, played the role of the devoted fiancé. But his eyes were restless. His phone buzzed constantly, and he never let it out of his reach. When Lily wasn't looking, he asked me pointed questions about timelines. When would the inheritance be finalized? When would the properties officially transfer? Whether everything was already filed? I answered vaguely, pretending to be distracted, overwhelmed. Inside, I memorized every word. That evening, Cole called again. "They're getting impatient," he said. "How can you tell?" "Because they're asking questions they shouldn't need answers to." I hesitated. "I think Marcus is hiding something. I don't know what yet." "Do you want to know?" Cole asked. The question hung in the air. Knowing meant crossing a line. It meant admitting that the people I loved might be capable of ending my life for money. "Yes," I said finally. "I need to know." There was a pause. Then Cole spoke carefully. "I can give you a device, small, discreet, it records sound. But once you hear what's said, you can't pretend anymore." I imagined Lily's laugh, Marcus's polite smile, the holidays we had spent together, the future wedding plans. "I understand," I said. "Bring it." He arrived late that night, parking a few houses down so the neighbors wouldn't notice. The device fit easily in the palm of my hand. It looked harmless, like a button from a coat. "This isn't about revenge," Cole said as he handed it to me. "This is about survival." After he left, I sat on my bed, staring at the small object. My hands shook. I told myself I was overreacting. That families fight, but they don't kill. That love had to mean something. But the memory of the knife skidding across the pavement wouldn't leave me. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The next afternoon, Lily announced she was going out to run errands. Marcus was upstairs showering. I could hear the water running through the pipes. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he would hear it. I moved quietly, stepping into the study where Marcus often worked. His messenger bag rested on the chair, exactly where he always left it. I opened it with trembling fingers, scanning the contents. Papers, a notebook, a second phone. My breath caught. I slipped the device into a small inner pocket and zipped the bag closed just as the water shut off upstairs. I retreated to the kitchen, my pulse racing, my mind spinning with what-ifs. That night felt endless. I lay in bed with my phone connected to the device, the volume low, the room dark. For a long time there was nothing, just the faint rustle of movement, distant voices muffled beyond recognition. I began to wonder if I had imagined everything. Then I heard Lily's voice. It wasn't the warm, familiar tone she used with me. It was sharp, low, urgent. "Are you sure she didn't notice anything?" she asked. My entire body went cold. Marcus answered, his voice tense. "She's acting normal, too normal." "Normal doesn't mean stupid," Lily snapped. "The airport was too close." "I know," he said, "but the guy said it was bad timing, wrong place, wrong moment." "Wrong place, wrong moment," Lily exhaled sharply. "We can't afford another mistake." "Another." I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. My heart felt like it was tearing itself apart. Marcus spoke again, lower now. "Once the properties transfer, it won't matter. Everything will be settled." "And if she changes something?" Lily asked. There was a brief silence. Then Marcus said the words that shattered whatever hope I had left. "That's why she has to go." The room seemed to tilt. Tears streamed down my face, silent and unstoppable. I tasted salt and bile and disbelief. My sister, my protector, the person I had built my life around. I turned the phone face down on the bed and curled into myself, my body shaking. There was no misunderstanding, no ambiguity. They weren't talking in hypotheticals. They were planning my death. When the voices faded, I lay there for a long time, staring into the darkness. I didn't scream. I didn't run. Something inside me hardened, sharp and clear. By the time the sun rose, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was no longer just listening to survive. I was listening to fight back. I stood outside my own front door for a long moment before going in, my key resting cold and heavy in my palm. The house looked the same as it always had, warm lights glowing through the windows, curtains drawn just enough to suggest comfort and safety. But I knew better now. Whatever waited for me inside was no longer home. It was territory I had to navigate carefully, like a minefield disguised as a living room. When I finally opened the door, the smell of dinner hit me first. Garlic, olive oil, something simmering gently on the stove. Lily's cooking. A sound followed, the soft clink of utensils, then her voice drifting from the kitchen. "Sarah, is that you?" "Yes," I answered, forcing my tone to stay light. "I'm back." She appeared a second later, wiping her hands on a towel, her face breaking into a smile that looked a little too rehearsed. She crossed the room quickly and wrapped her arms around me. The hug was tight, almost desperate, and it lasted longer than usual. "You scared me," she said into my shoulder. "You didn't answer my messages earlier." "I told you," I replied calmly, patting her back. "I needed some time to clear my head." She pulled away just enough to look at my face, her eyes flicking over me like she was checking for damage. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." Behind her, I noticed the front door hadn't been locked properly. A small thing, but enough to make my stomach tighten. Lily was usually meticulous about things like that. Marcus stepped into the hallway from the living room, his phone in his hand. "Hey," he said, smiling. "Welcome back." His smile was polite, controlled. His eyes, however, were alert, watching me closely. "Everything go all right today?" "Yes," I said again. "Nothing unusual." The word hung in the air for half a second longer than it should have. Dinner passed in a strange blur. Lily talked too much, filling the silence with trivial stories about errands and errands she planned to run the next day. Marcus asked questions, casual on the surface but precise in their wording. Had I gone to see anyone important? Was I still planning to travel again soon? Whether the lawyer meeting had been rescheduled? I answered without hesitation, but without substance. Vague dates, general responses. Nothing concrete. All the while, I paid attention to their reactions. The way Marcus's jaw tightened when I mentioned paperwork. The way Lily's fork paused midair when I spoke about future plans. At one point, Marcus leaned back in his chair and studied me openly. "You seem calmer," he said. "That's good. You've been under a lot of stress." I smiled faintly. I realized panicking doesn't help. He nodded, as if satisfied, but I caught the flicker of something else in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or frustration. After dinner, Lily insisted on making tea. She moved around the kitchen with restless energy, opening cabinets she didn't need, rearranging things that were already in place. Marcus checked his phone again and again, typing quick replies, his shoulders tense. I excused myself and went upstairs, closing my bedroom door softly behind me. Only then did I allow myself to breathe a little deeper. My hands were steady now, but my heart was heavy. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I replayed the words I had heard the night before. Lily's voice cold and urgent. Marcus's answer final and merciless. That's why she has to go. I didn't cry this time. I couldn't afford to. My phone vibrated quietly. A message from Cole. "How are they acting?" I typed back carefully. Attentive, curious, watching me. A few seconds later, his reply appeared. "That's expected. They're checking if you know." I stared at the screen, then at the door, imagining Lily on the other side. Marcus moving through the house. Both of them convinced I was still the same sister they had always known. Trusting. Predictable. Easy. Cole's next message came through. "If you're going to stay there, you need to decide how far you're willing to go." I set the phone down and walked to the window. Outside, the street was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Neighbors going about their lives, unaware that inside this house, a quiet war had begun. I went back downstairs after a few minutes. Lily was curled up on the couch, a blanket over her legs, scrolling through her phone. Marcus stood near the kitchen counter, pouring himself a glass of water. "You all right?" Lily asked when she saw me. "Just needed a moment," I replied. "I'm exhausted." She patted the space next to her. "Sit with me." I did, careful to relax my shoulders, to let my body language reflect comfort, not vigilance. Lily leaned against me like she used to, her head resting briefly on my arm. It felt wrong now, like a memory replayed out of context. "I've been thinking," she said softly, not looking at me. "Maybe we should all slow down a bit. You've been carrying too much alone." Marcus glanced over at us, his expression unreadable. "Your sister's right," he said. "There's no rush. These things take time." I nodded. That's what I've realized. For a moment I thought I saw relief flicker across their faces. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Marcus lingered in the living room, pretending to watch television. I sat across from him with a book open in my lap, not turning a single page. The silence stretched between us, heavy but controlled. "You know," he said eventually, "if you ever need help with the paperwork, I'm here. I might not be family by blood, but I care about you." I met his gaze and smiled. "I know. That means a lot." He studied my face, searching for something, then nodded and stood. "Good night." "Good night." When the house finally went quiet, I stayed awake, listening. Footsteps upstairs, a door opening, then closing, whispers too low to make out. I didn't move. I didn't need to hear the words again to know what they were about. The next morning, Lily knocked on my door early. "Coffee?" she asked brightly. I followed her downstairs, my mind already working through possibilities. Today would be about observation, about learning patterns, about choosing the right moment. As we sat at the kitchen table, Lily stirred her coffee nervously. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe we should schedule a family meeting with the lawyer, just to make sure we're all on the same page." Marcus looked up quickly, then masked his reaction with a sip of coffee. "That might be a good idea," he said. I shrugged. We'll see. There's no rush. Lily's spoon paused against the mug. No rush? No, I repeated gently. We have time. Her eyes flicked to Marcus, then back to me. Of course, she said, forcing a smile. Later that afternoon, while Lily was out and Marcus was in the shower, I stood alone in the hallway listening to the sound of running water. My heart beat steadily, not wildly like before. Fear had given way to focus. I didn't act yet, I wasn't ready, but I knew now what I was capable of. That evening, Cole called again. I stepped outside to take it, the cool air grounding me. They still think you're unaware, he said after I described the day. That's good. How long can I keep this up? I asked. As long as you need, he replied. But remember, silence isn't weakness, it's preparation. I looked back at the house, at the warm glow in the windows. They think I came back as their sister, I said quietly. And who did you come back as? Cole asked. I didn't hesitate. Their witness. When I went back inside, Lily was laughing at something Marcus had said, the sound light and familiar. I joined them, smiling, nodding, playing my part. They relaxed, believing the danger had passed. They had no idea that every word, every gesture, every careless question was being etched into my memory, catalogued and prepared. The old version of me, the one who trusted without question, had stayed behind at the airport. What walked back into this house was someone else entirely. I held the small recording device in my palm long after Cole had left, staring at it as if it might burn me if I looked too closely. It was no bigger than a coin, smooth and light, completely unremarkable. And yet I knew that once I used it, there would be no turning back. Whatever I heard would live inside me forever. Up until that moment, part of me still clung to denial, a desperate, childish hope that I had misunderstood everything, that the man at the airport had been a coincidence, that Lily's worry was just anxiety, that Marcus's questions were nothing more than curiosity. Families argued, people said strange things under stress. Surely my own sister wouldn't plan my death. But the image of that knife scraping across the concrete at the airport refused to fade. Neither did the way the police officers had rushed past the car, not toward me, but toward the man waiting in the dark. Someone had expected me to step out of that taxi. Someone had paid for that moment. I sat on the edge of my bed, breathing slowly, grounding myself the way my mother had taught me when panic threatened to take over. Feel your feet. Feel the floor. Don't let fear decide for you. By the time the house grew quiet, my hands had stopped shaking. Downstairs I could hear Lily and Marcus talking softly in the living room. Their voices blended together, low and intimate, like any engaged couple winding down for the night. The sound alone twisted something deep in my chest. These were the people who had shared my table, my holidays, my grief, the people I would have trusted with my life without hesitation. I slipped the device into the pocket of my robe and forced myself to wait. The next day passed in slow motion. Lily stayed close, hovering as if I might disappear if she took her eyes off me for too long. Marcus left and returned, his movements restless, his phone never far from his hand. I watched everything, cataloging patterns, noting habits I had once ignored. He always put his leather messenger bag in the same place when he came home, on the chair in the study just beside the desk. He never checked it twice, never locked it. It was as if he assumed the house itself was a fortress. In the early afternoon, Lily announced she was going out to pick up groceries and a few things for dinner. She asked Marcus if he wanted anything special. He waved her off, distracted, already heading upstairs to shower. I stood in the kitchen listening to the sound of her car pulling away, my pulse pounding in my ears. The house felt suddenly hollow, the air heavy with opportunity. The water started running upstairs. Now, I told myself, or you never will. I moved through the hallway as quietly as I could, every sense on high alert. The study door was ajar. Marcus's bag sat exactly where I expected it to be, the leather worn soft from use. For a moment I hesitated, my hand hovering inches from the zipper. This was my sister's fiancé. This was crossing a line no one ever wanted to cross. Then I remembered Lily's voice on the phone the night before the airport. Her insistence that I go alone. Her request that I tell no one. I unzipped the bag. Inside were documents, neatly stacked. A notebook filled with tight, precise handwriting. A phone I had never seen before. My stomach dropped at the sight of it. He had told me more than once that he hated carrying multiple devices. I slid the recording device into a small inner pocket and zipped the bag closed just as the water upstairs shut off. My heart raced as I stepped back into the hallway, my hands damp with sweat. I made it to the kitchen just as Marcus came downstairs, towel around his neck, hair still wet. "Hey," he said casually. "You okay?" "Yes," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just making some tea." He nodded, poured himself a glass of water, and went back upstairs without another word. I stood there for a long moment, listening to my own breathing, amazed that I hadn't collapsed. That night was the longest of my life. I lay in bed with the lights off, my phone connected to the device, the volume turned low. Every creak of the house made my muscles tense. Minutes passed. Then half an hour. Nothing but faint background noise. I started to wonder if I had made a terrible mistake, if my fear had pushed me into paranoia. Just as doubt began to creep back in, I heard Lily's voice. It wasn't loud, it wasn't affectionate. It was sharp, controlled, stripped of the warmth she used with me. "Are you sure she didn't notice anything?" she asked. My body went completely still. Marcus answered a second later. "She's acting normal." "Normal doesn't mean stupid," Lily snapped. "The airport was too close." My breath caught painfully in my chest. The airport. They were talking about it openly now, as if the danger had passed. "I know," Marcus said, "but the guy said it was bad timing, wrong place, wrong moment." "Wrong place, wrong moment." "Not wrong plan." Lily exhaled sharply. "We can't afford another mistake." Another mistake. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. I pressed my hand over my mouth, terrified that even the smallest sound might give me away. I had imagined anger, greed, desperation. I had not imagined how cold they would sound. How efficient. Marcus lowered his voice. "Once the paperwork is finalized, this will all be over." "And if she changes something?" Lily asked. There was a pause. A silence so heavy it felt intentional. Then Marcus spoke again, his tone final. "That's why she has to go." The words hit me like a physical blow. I curled onto my side, clutching the pillow to my chest as silent sobs racked my body. This was no misunderstanding, no emotional outburst taken out of context. This was a decision, calculated, agreed upon. My sister, the girl I had protected my entire life, the man she loved. They were planning to erase me. The voices continued for a few more minutes, discussing timelines, money, pressure. I barely heard them. My mind was screaming too loudly. Every shared memory replayed in my head, now twisted, contaminated. Family dinners, laughter, promises. When the conversation ended, I stared into the darkness, my face wet with tears, my heart pounding with a strange new clarity. Fear was still there, sharp and real. But beneath it, something else had taken shape. Resolve. I wiped my face carefully and sat up, forcing myself to breathe slowly until my hands stopped trembling. Panic would get me killed. Emotion would cloud my judgment. If I wanted to survive, I had to become someone they underestimated. I unplugged the device and turned the phone face down, as if that alone could contain the truth I had just heard. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I simply waited for the first hint of morning light to creep through the curtains. When the sun finally rose, it illuminated a room that felt unfamiliar, as if I had woken up in someone else's life. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, and studied my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked the same. Same hair, same tired eyes. But something fundamental had shifted. The softness was gone. In its place was a quiet, focused intensity I barely recognized. I was no longer guessing. I was no longer suspecting. I knew. Downstairs, I heard Lily moving around the kitchen, humming softly to herself. The normalcy of the sound made my stomach turn. She sounded content, unburdened, as if she hadn't spent the night planning my death. I joined her at the table, accepting a cup of coffee with a steady hand. She smiled at me, warm and familiar. "You look better," she said. "Did you sleep okay?" "Well enough," I replied. Marcus joined us a few minutes later, greeting me with a nod, his expression relaxed. I watched him closely, searching for any crack, any sign of guilt. There was nothing. He looked like a man who believed he was still in control. As they talked about the day ahead, I listened, nodding at the right moments, laughing softly when expected. Inside, I was already planning. I would not confront them. I would not run. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me afraid. If they thought I was an obstacle, I would become their ending. As I carried my empty cup to the sink, I caught Lily watching me from across the room, her eyes sharp with calculation. I met her gaze and smiled, gentle and unguarded. She smiled back, reassured. And in that moment, I understood the most dangerous truth of all. The people who plan your destruction rarely see themselves as villains. They see themselves as survivors. And I was done letting them decide which one of us deserved to live. Morning came quietly, almost cruelly so. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen window as if nothing in the world had changed, as if two people downstairs hadn't discussed erasing me from existence just hours earlier. I stood at the counter making coffee, my movement steady, my face composed, while inside my chest something cold and deliberate had taken hold. Lily appeared first, her hair loosely tied back, her expression soft with concern. "You're up early," she said. "Did you sleep at all?" I met her eyes and nodded. "Enough." She smiled with relief, as if that single word had eased a weight she carried. "Good. You've been running yourself into the ground." Marcus came down moments later, buttoning his shirt, phone already in his hand. He glanced at me briefly, then looked away, satisfied by what he saw. Calm, normal, unaware. I poured coffee for all of us, the domestic ritual grounding me. Every sound felt sharper now. The clink of ceramic, the hum of the refrigerator, Lily's spoon stirring sugar into her cup, the metal tapping against porcelain in a steady rhythm. "So," Marcus said casually, "did you reschedule that meeting with Mom's lawyer?" There it was, the question he couldn't help asking. "I went yesterday," I replied, keeping my tone light, "just to ask a few things." Lily's spoon paused for half a second before she resumed stirring. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said, "mostly clarifications." Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Good. These things can get complicated." That morning, I drove alone to the office of my mother's longtime attorney, a man who had known her for decades and had watched me grow up. The building was old, brick and glass, solid in a way that felt reassuring. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and polished wood. He looked up from his desk when I entered, surprise flickering across his face. "Sarah," he said warmly, "I wasn't expecting you." "I know," I replied, taking a seat across from him. "I won't take much of your time." He studied me for a moment, his expression shifting from cordial to attentive. "You look serious." "I am." I didn't tell him everything. I didn't need to. Instead, I asked the questions that mattered. "If something happened to me unexpectedly," I said, folding my hands in my lap, "who benefits?" He leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "As things stand, your sister would inherit most of the assets, the business, the properties. Her fiancé would likely gain control through her." "And if my death were sudden," I pressed, "or suspicious?" He hesitated. "That would depend on the circumstances. But legally, unless proven otherwise, the will stands." The answer settled heavily in my chest. I nodded slowly. I want to change it." His eyebrows rose slightly. "That's a significant decision." "I know," I said. "I want to make sure that if I die before I turn 60, under any unclear circumstances, none of my assets go to family members. I want everything directed to charity, medical research, housing for women." He studied my face carefully. "Are you certain?" I thought of Lily's voice, sharp and urgent. I thought of Marcus's calm finality. I thought of the man waiting in the dark at the airport. "I've never been more certain of anything," I said. The paperwork took longer than I expected. Pages and pages of legal language, clauses and contingencies designed to protect intent. When I finally signed my name, my hand didn't shake. With that signature, I didn't just change a document, I changed the rules of the game. As I stood to leave, the lawyer paused. "Your mother was very particular about safeguards," he said quietly. "She would approve of this." I swallowed hard and nodded. "Thank you." I didn't announce the change. I didn't call Lily or Marcus. I didn't confront anyone. Instead, I let the information travel the way dangerous truths always do, through whispers and assumptions. By that evening, the shift was already visible. Marcus brought home flowers, expensive ones, the kind he never bothered with before. He placed them on the table with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "For you," he said. "You've been through a lot." Lily hovered nearby, watching closely. "We're worried about you," she added softly. "All this stress can't be good for your health." I thanked them, genuinely polite, genuinely calm. Inside, I felt a strange sense of control settle into place. They didn't know what I had done, but they felt it. Something had changed, and it frightened them. That night, Lily brought me a small bottle, its label covered in cheerful colors. "Vitamins," she said brightly. "Imported. Marcus found them for you. They're supposed to help with fatigue." Marcus stood behind her, his expression carefully neutral. I took the bottle in my hands and examined it. The seal was intact, but just barely. The edge looked tampered with, as if someone had tried to reseal it after opening. "That's thoughtful," I said, smiling. "Thank you." At dinner, Lily watched me closely as I ate, her eyes flicking again and again to the bottle sitting near my plate. Marcus didn't speak much. He didn't need to. His attention was focused entirely on me. "Why don't you take one now?" Lily suggested lightly. "So you don't forget." I stood and walked to the sink, pouring myself a glass of water. In the privacy of the kitchen, my hands moved quickly. I tipped one capsule into my palm, examined it, then let it slide silently down the drain. I replaced it with a mint candy I kept in my purse, similar in size and color. When I returned to the table, I placed it on my tongue and swallowed, lifting the glass so they could see. Marcus exhaled slowly. Lily smiled with visible relief. That night, alone in my room, I photographed the bottle, the label, the tampered seal. I sealed the remaining capsules in a bag and hid them where only I could find them. Evidence, not emotion, would keep me alive. The following days were a study in pressure. Marcus grew restless, snapping at small things, his phone buzzing constantly with messages he read and deleted. Lily's moods swung wildly between affection and irritation. They watched me for signs of weakness, for dizziness or fatigue that never came. I gave them just enough to keep them guessing. A mention of a headache, a quiet moment of rest on the couch. Nothing more. On the third day, Marcus suggested dinner. "Just family," he said. "We should talk." I agreed, my smile gentle, my voice steady. By then, I understood exactly what I was doing. Changing the will hadn't just protected my assets. It had removed their motive. Killing me would no longer solve their problems. It would make everything worse. And desperate people, when cornered, make mistakes. That evening, as I lay in bed, listening to the house settle around me, I felt no fear. Only clarity. They couldn't erase me quietly anymore. And they didn't yet realize that the power they thought they held had already slipped through their fingers. The house felt different that evening, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lily moved through the kitchen with a brightness that rang false, humming softly, her voice a fraction too cheerful. Marcus lingered near the counter, sleeves rolled up, pretending to scroll through his phone while watching me from the corner of his eye. Every movement felt staged. Every smile felt measured. I recognized the pattern now. This wasn't care. It was preparation. Dinner was elaborate, more effort than usual. Lily had cooked my favorite dish from childhood, the one she used to beg me to make for her when we were younger. The smell should have comforted me. Instead, it tightened my chest. Nostalgia was one of their sharpest tools. "You've been so pale lately," Lily said as she set the plates down. "I thought you might need something hearty." I smiled and thanked her, my voice steady. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," she replied quickly. "We worry about you." Marcus pulled out a chair for me, his touch light on my shoulder. "Sit. You should rest." The word rest echoed in my mind like a warning. We ate in near silence at first, the sound of cutlery against plates unnaturally loud. Lily kept glancing at me between bites, her eyes darting to the small bottle sitting near my glass. Marcus barely touched his food. His attention was fixed on me, waiting. Halfway through the meal, Lily cleared her throat. "Did you take your vitamin today?" I met her gaze without flinching. "Not yet." Her fingers tightened around her fork. "You should. They work better with food." Marcus nodded once, as if to reinforce the suggestion. "It's important," he said. "You've been under so much stress." I pushed my chair back slightly and stood. "I'll get some water." In the kitchen, my hands moved calmly, efficiently. I opened the bottle, careful not to let it rattle. The capsule lay innocently in my palm, smooth and pale. I imagined it dissolving inside me, imagined dizziness, weakness, darkness. I tipped it into the sink and watched it disappear, then reached into my purse and pulled out a mint candy I had kept just for this moment. When I returned to the table, Lily and Marcus were watching me closely. I placed the candy on my tongue and swallowed, lifting the glass so they could see. Lily's shoulders sagged in relief. Marcus's jaw loosened, his eyes flicking away for the first time that evening. "There," I said lightly. "Happy?" Lily smiled, her eyes shining with something dangerously close to triumph. "Of course, we just want you healthy." The rest of the dinner passed in a strange haze. I laughed when expected, nodded at the right moments, played the role of the trusting sister. Inside, my senses were sharp, every instinct alert. I noted the way Marcus checked his phone under the table, the way Lily's smile faded whenever she thought I wasn't looking. That night, I lay awake listening to the house. Footsteps in the hallway, a door closing softly. Whispered voices drifting through the vents, too faint to make out words, but not intent. They were waiting for something, for me to weaken, for me to fade. Morning came, and with it, disappointment. I moved through the day as usual. I made coffee. I answered emails. I went for a short walk around the block. No dizziness, no nausea, no sign that anything had worked. By midday, the tension was palpable. Lily snapped at Marcus over nothing, her voice sharp and brittle. Marcus slammed a drawer shut harder than necessary, his patience fraying. I watched it all quietly, pretending not to notice. That afternoon, Lily cornered me in the living room. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked, her tone too casual. "Why wouldn't I be?" I replied. You look tired," she insisted. I shrugged. "Grief does that." She nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing as she searched my face. "Maybe you should rest more. Let us take care of things for a while." The offer was tempting, almost convincing, almost. "I'm fine," I said gently. "Really?" She turned away, her frustration barely concealed. That evening, Marcus suggested we all sit together. "Just talk," he said. "Clear the air." We sat in the living room, the lights low, the atmosphere thick. Lily perched on the edge of the couch, twisting her hands in her lap. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his posture tense. "I've been thinking," Lily began. "Maybe we should slow things down. You've been pushing yourself too hard." I nodded. "I know." Marcus leaned forward. "We just want what's best for you." There it was again. The phrase that meant nothing and everything. "I appreciate that," I said. "But I'm stronger than you think." A flicker of something dark crossed Marcus's face, gone almost instantly. Lily's fingers tightened. Later that night, I retreated to my room and locked the door, my heart pounding. I pulled the remaining capsules from their hiding place and examined them under the light. They looked harmless. Ordinary. But I knew better now. I photographed them, sealed them carefully, and sent the images to Cole. His reply came quickly. "Good. Don't confront them. This is evidence." I sat on the edge of my bed, the weight of it all pressing down on me. They had tried to poison me. Not out of panic, not in a moment of rage, but calmly, methodically, as if it were just another step in their plan. The realization didn't make me angry. It made me clear. The next day, I changed tactics. I let myself appear weak. At breakfast, I mentioned a headache, pressing my fingers to my temple. Lily's eyes lit up with something like hope. Marcus watched me closely, his posture relaxing. "I might lie down for a bit," I said softly. Lily was at my side in an instant. "Of course. You should rest." I spent the afternoon on the couch, eyes closed, breathing evenly, listening to the house. I heard Lily on the phone, her voice low and urgent. I heard Marcus pacing, the sound of his footsteps uneven. "It should have worked by now," Lily hissed at one point, her voice carrying just enough for me to hear. Marcus's reply was muffled, but the frustration was unmistakable. That night I lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. They were unraveling. The pressure was getting to them. The failure of their plan had only intensified their desperation. And desperate people don't wait. My phone buzzed softly in the darkness. A message from an unknown number. "We need another way." I stared at the screen, my pulse steady, my mind already moving ahead. They had crossed a line they could never step back over. Whatever came next would be bigger, louder, more dangerous. But I was ready. As I turned the phone face down on the nightstand, one thought settled into my bones with chilling certainty. They hadn't poisoned me to make me suffer. They had poisoned me to erase me, and I would not disappear quietly. I called Marcus late in the morning, my voice light and almost cheerful, as if nothing dark had settled between us. "I was thinking," I said, pacing slowly through the living room. "Maybe we should have dinner together tonight. Just us. Family." There was a pause on the other end of the line, brief but telling. I could almost picture him glancing toward Lily, silently weighing risk against opportunity. "Sure," he said at last. "That sounds nice." "It does," I replied. "I'll cook." When I hung up, I stood still for a long moment, letting the quiet wrap around me. This wasn't an invitation. It was a stage. And tonight I intended to use it. I spent the afternoon preparing the house with deliberate care. I set the table with our best dishes, the ones we only used on holidays. I lit candles, not too many, just enough to soften the room and create shadows. I chose music low and unobtrusive. Everything looked warm, safe, familiar. Inside, I was calm in a way that surprised even me. Lily arrived first, dressed carefully, her makeup subtle, her smile practiced. "This is lovely," she said, glancing around. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," I replied. "We've been through a lot." She nodded, her eyes lingering on my face. "Are you feeling better?" "Much," I said. "Clear-headed." Marcus came in a few minutes later, carrying a bottle of wine. He kissed my cheek lightly, his touch cautious. "Smells amazing," he said. Dinner began politely. We talked about nothing important. Weather, work, a show Lily had been watching. I served them, refilled glasses, laughed softly at the right moments. They relaxed, just a little, lulled by routine. Halfway through the meal, I set my fork down and dabbed my lips with a napkin. "I had the strangest dream last night," I said casually. Marcus glanced up. Lily stiffened almost imperceptibly. "A dream?" she asked. "Yes," I continued. "It felt so real. I keep thinking about it." "What happened?" Marcus asked, his tone neutral. I smiled faintly. "There was a woman. She had everything she thought she needed. A home, a family, people she trusted." I paused, watching their faces. But behind her back, 2 of those people were planning to kill her. Lily's fork clattered softly against her plate. I kept my voice gentle, almost reflective. "They talked about money, about timing, about how easy it would be if she just disappeared." Marcus took a long sip of wine, his hand trembling slightly. "That's dark," he said. "I know," I replied. "In the dream there was even a man waiting for her somewhere public. An airport, maybe, with something in his pocket." I tilted my head. It was all very specific. The color drained from Lily's face. She reached for her glass and missed it on the first try. I laughed lightly. "It's ridiculous, isn't it? Dreams can be so dramatic." "Yes," Lily said quickly. "Ridiculous." Marcus cleared his throat. "You shouldn't let things like that get to you." "I'm not," I said calmly. "Actually, the dream made me think about something else." I reached for my glass, took a small sip, then set it down. "I went to see Mom's lawyer." Silence settled over the table like a heavy cloth. "I changed my will," I continued, my tone serene. "If anything happens to me before I turn 60, everything goes to charity. Medical research, housing programs, not a penny to family." Lily's mouth opened, then closed. Marcus froze, his eyes locked on me. "You did what?" Lily whispered. "I didn't want to risk my death becoming someone else's reward," I said simply. "It felt right." "That's extreme," Marcus said, his composure cracking. "You didn't even discuss it with us." "I didn't need to," I replied. "It's my decision." Lily's voice rose, sharp and panicked. "Sarah, you can't just cut your family out like that." I met her gaze steadily. "If I die, you'll still have your lives. Your future." "I don't think money should be a motive for anything." Marcus leaned forward, his jaw tight. "Is it already filed?" The question slipped out before he could stop himself. I smiled gently. "Why do you ask?" He leaned back too quickly. "I'm just concerned." "Don't be," I said. "I feel very peaceful about it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The candle flames flickered, casting uneasy shadows across their faces. I could almost hear the calculations running through their minds, the plans collapsing one by one. Finally, I softened my tone. "Of course, I can always revisit it. Nothing has to be final tonight." The relief was immediate and unmistakable. Lily's shoulders dropped. Marcus exhaled slowly. "That might be wise," Lily said, forcing a smile. "You shouldn't make big decisions when you're emotional." "Maybe," I agreed. "We'll see." The rest of the evening passed in strained politeness. They left earlier than usual, both of them distracted, their thoughts clearly elsewhere. I watched from the doorway as Marcus guided Lily to the car, their heads bent close together, voices urgent. When the door closed behind them, the house fell silent. I moved quickly then, gathering plates, blowing out candles, stripping away the warmth I had carefully constructed. In the corner of the room, a tiny indicator light blinked steadily, unnoticed. Cole had installed it earlier that day. Every raised voice, every slip, all of it captured. My phone vibrated. "They're panicking," Cole texted. Good. I sat at the table alone, staring at the empty chairs across from me. I felt no triumph, only certainty. They could no longer kill me for profit. That door was closed, and when greed is cut off, desperation takes its place. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I heard my phone buzz again. A message from Marcus this time. We need to talk tomorrow. I smiled faintly in the darkness. He didn't know it yet, but tonight had changed everything. The balance had shifted. The mask had cracked. When killing no longer worked, they would reach for something louder, something messier. And I would be ready. The silence that afternoon felt unnatural, like the calm before a storm that everyone senses but no one names. I moved through the house alone, my footsteps echoing softly against the hardwood floors, every sound amplified by the absence of Lily and Marcus. No messages, no calls, no fake concern, just quiet. I checked the front porch camera and frowned. The signal flickered for a split second, then stabilized again. It was subtle, easy to miss, but I had learned not to ignore subtle things. Someone had tested the system. I didn't panic. Panic would have ruined everything. Instead, I picked up my phone and called Cole. "They're coming," I said the moment he answered. "I know," he replied calmly. "We've been tracking their movements." "I don't want protection here," I said. "Not yet." There was a pause. "Sarah, let them think I'm alone," I said firmly. "Let them come." Cole exhaled slowly on the other end. He knew what that meant. "Then we do it your way. Cameras are live. Audio is live. If anything goes wrong—" "It won't," I interrupted. "They won't hurt me, not yet. They need something from me first." I ended the call and set my phone down, my hands steady, my mind clear. I turned off the porch light as dusk settled over the street, letting the house sink into shadow. From the outside, it would look empty. Vulnerable. Just after 9, headlights swept across the living room wall. I stayed where I was, seated on the couch, my heart beating slow and controlled. The engine cut off. Doors opened. I heard voices, low and tense, carried faintly through the night air. The front door unlocked. Marcus came in first, moving quickly, his eyes scanning the room. 2 men followed him, both larger than him, built like they were used to forcing things to happen. Lily entered last, her face pale, her jaw set tight with something that looked like resolve, but felt more like terror poorly disguised. "Sarah," Lily called, her voice sharp, stripped of warmth. "We need to talk." I didn't answer. They moved deeper into the house, footsteps heavy now, no longer pretending this was a visit. One of the men checked the kitchen, the other headed toward the stairs. "Find her," Marcus snapped. My laptop on the coffee table suddenly chimed to life. They froze. The screen lit up and my face appeared, calm and centered, framed by the dim light of another room entirely. I looked directly into the camera, then at each of them as if we were sitting across from one another. "Good evening," I said evenly. Lily gasped. "Where are you?" "Safe," I replied, "and very disappointed." Marcus stepped closer to the screen, his face twisted with rage and confusion. "What is this?" "This," I said, "is everything you've been trying to avoid." I tilted the screen slightly so they could see the small icon blinking in the corner. "Live stream," a counter ticking upward. "You're being recorded," I continued. "Every word, every move. If I press one button, this footage goes straight to my lawyer and the police." One of the men swore under his breath. "This wasn't the deal." Lily spun on Marcus. "You said she wouldn't know." Marcus ignored her, his eyes locked on the screen. "What do you want?" I took a breath. This was the moment where everything balanced on a knife's edge. "I know about your debts," I said calmly. "I know about the pressure you're under. And I know you're running out of time." Lily's eyes widened. "How? You talk too much," I said. "Both of you." Marcus clenched his fists. "If you know all that, then you know why we're here." "Yes," I said. "And I also know killing me won't help you anymore." Silence fell heavy over the room. "But," I continued, "I'm not cruel enough to let you be destroyed if there's another way." The men exchanged glances. Marcus leaned forward, suspicion and hope battling across his face. "Another way?" "There's money," I said. "Not in the will, not tied to the properties. A private reserve my mother kept before she died." Lily's breath caught. Where? I smiled faintly. An old warehouse my family owns? On the south side. No one goes there anymore. Marcus's eyes lit up despite himself. How much? Enough, I replied. Enough to pay off the debts and leave town. One of the men stepped closer to the screen. And why would you give us that? Because once you take it, I said, you disappear from my life forever. Marcus hesitated. Lily didn't. Tell us where, she said urgently. Now. I gave them the details slowly, carefully. The address, the exact spot inside, a safe buried beneath the concrete floor where an old machine used to stand. I even gave them the combination, based on a date they knew well, something personal enough to feel believable. As I spoke, I watched greed take over Marcus's expression, smoothing away his fear. Lily nodded rapidly, already convinced. We don't need you anymore, Marcus said, his voice shaking with anticipation. Stay where you are. I will, I said. You have my word. The screen went dark as he slammed the laptop shut. From my own location miles away, I watched the red dot begin to move on my phone. Their van pulling away from the house, heading exactly where I had planned. I didn't smile, not yet. Cole's car appeared beside me minutes later, silent and steady. They took the bait, he said. Yes, I replied, my eyes fixed on the map. They always do. We followed at a distance, never close enough to raise suspicion. The city lights faded into industrial darkness, rusted buildings lining the road like forgotten memories. The warehouse loomed ahead, a decaying shell of concrete and steel, exactly as I had described. Marcus crashed through the rusted gate without hesitation. The van skidded to a stop inside the yard. I watched as they piled out, armed with crowbars and shovels, their movements frantic now, driven by desperation. They're committed, Cole murmured. They were the moment they walked into my house, I replied. We parked far enough away to remain unseen. The night swallowed us whole. Inside the warehouse, lights flickered on. Shadows danced against cracked walls as they moved to the back, just as I had told them. I imagined Marcus barking orders, Lily hovering close, her nerves stretched thin. The sound of metal striking concrete echoed through the night. Time passed slowly. My fingers tightened around my phone as I watched their location remain fixed. They were digging, breaking through the floor, destroying what little remained of that place. They're about to open it, Cole said, listening to updates through his earpiece. I closed my eyes briefly, then opened them again. This is where it ends, I whispered. In the distance, faint but unmistakable, sirens began to rise. I pictured Marcus's face when he realized there was no money, no escape, only proof. The road they had chosen led to only one place, and they were driving themselves straight into it. The warehouse smelled of rust and wet concrete, the kind of place where time went to rot. Marcus's flashlight cut through the darkness in sharp, frantic strokes as he paced the cracked floor, his breath coming fast and uneven. Lily stood close to him, arms wrapped around herself, eyes darting at every sound. The two men they had brought were already working, crowbars slamming into the concrete exactly where I had told them to dig. "Harder!" Marcus snapped. "It's under there. I know it is." The first crack split the floor with a dull echo that rolled through the empty space. Dust rose into the air, catching in the beams of their flashlights. Lily coughed, waving her hand in front of her face, but she didn't step back. Greed anchored her feet to the spot. Minutes dragged on. Sweat soaked through Marcus's shirt. One of the men paused to wipe his brow. "This better be worth it," he muttered. "It will be," Marcus said, though his voice wavered. "There's cash, gold, enough to fix everything." Fix everything. The phrase sounded hollow even to him. The crowbar struck something solid with a sharp metallic clang. All movement froze. "There," one of the men said, excitement surging into his voice. "We hit metal." Marcus shoved forward, nearly tripping over broken concrete. Together they cleared the debris, revealing the dull, unmistakable top of a safe buried beneath the floor. Lily let out a sharp laugh, half hysteria, half triumph. "I knew it," she said. "I told you she wouldn't lie about that." Marcus dropped to his knees, brushing dirt away with shaking hands. "Get it out," he ordered. "Now!" It took all four of them to wrench the safe free. They dragged it into the open space, the metal scraping loudly against the floor. Marcus stared at it as if it were a living thing, his ticket out of the nightmare closing in on him. "What's the combination?" one of the men asked. Marcus swallowed. "Our anniversary, backward." He spun the dial, his fingers trembling so badly he had to start over twice. The warehouse seemed to hold its breath with him. Finally, there was a soft click. The door swung open. For a heartbeat, no one moved. There was no gold, no stacks of cash, no glittering promise of salvation. Inside were folders, papers, photographs. Marcus's face drained of color. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." He began tearing through the contents, his movements frantic, desperate. Receipts spilled onto the floor, bank statements, transaction records. Lily leaned over his shoulder, her eyes scanning wildly until understanding dawned. These are our transfers," she said, her voice breaking. "This is everything." Photographs slid free, scattering across the concrete, Marcus and Lily entering hotels, sitting close together in restaurants, boarding flights, laughing, proof laid bare under the harsh beam of a flashlight. At the very top of the pile sat a white envelope. My handwriting. Marcus's hands shook as he picked it up. "Open it," Lily hissed. He tore it open and unfolded the single sheet inside. "The money you're looking for isn't here. What you found is the truth. And the truth has teeth. The police are already on their way." The words blurred as his vision tunneled. Lily screamed, a raw, animal sound that echoed off the warehouse walls. "You set us up!" she shrieked. "You promised!" Marcus staggered back, the paper slipping from his fingers. "She lied," he said weakly. "She lied." Before either of them could say anything else, red and blue lights flooded the broken windows. Sirens cut through the night, loud and relentless. A voice boomed through a loudspeaker, calm and authoritative. "Police, drop your weapons and put your hands where we can see them." The men bolted first, sprinting toward a side door that burst inward as officers stormed the building. Shouts, heavy boots, the sharp click of restraints. Everything happened at once, chaos collapsing into control. Marcus dropped to his knees without resistance, his strength gone. Lily stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, her mouth moving soundlessly. They were forced to the ground, hands wrenched behind their backs. The concrete was cold against Marcus's cheek. He could taste dust and blood. Then the noise shifted. The urgency faded. The officers formed a line. Footsteps echoed through the warehouse, measured and unhurried. I stepped into the light. I wore a simple coat, my hair pulled back, my expression calm. Cole walked beside me, his presence steady, protective. Marcus lifted his head and saw me, and something inside him finally broke. "Sarah," he sobbed. "Please, I didn't mean it. It got out of hand." Lily lunged forward, restrained immediately by an officer. "She made us do it," she screamed. "She tricked us. You know I love you." I stopped a few feet away, just close enough for them to see me clearly, not close enough for them to touch me. "You tried to poison me," I said quietly. "You planned to torture me. You stood in my house and decided my life was worth less than money." Marcus crawled toward me until an officer hauled him back. "I was desperate," he cried. "I was going to fix it. I swear." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but distance. Desperation doesn't excuse betrayal. I turned to Lily. "And you," I said softly. "You were my sister." She sobbed uncontrollably. "I was scared," he said. "I heard everything," I interrupted. "Every plan, every word." The officer in charge approached. "We're ready to take them in." I nodded once. As they were lifted to their feet, Marcus twisted around, his voice breaking. "You won," he said bitterly. "Is that what you wanted?" I met his gaze steadily. I wanted to live. The police cars pulled away, sirens fading into the distance, taking Lily and Marcus with them. The warehouse fell quiet again, empty except for the open safe and the scattered evidence of a life built on lies. I stood there for a long moment, breathing in the cold air, feeling the weight lift from my chest. Cole stepped closer. "It's over," he said gently. I looked at the safe one last time, solid on the outside, full of poison on the inside. "Yes," I replied, "it is." As we walked back toward the car, the night no longer felt threatening. It felt clean. For the first time since that midnight at the airport, I knew with absolute certainty that they could never hurt me again. 6 months passed, not in a rush, but in slow, deliberate steps, like a wound closing one careful layer at a time. The world did not stop for what had happened, yet everything in my life had shifted irrevocably. I woke each morning no longer bracing myself for danger, no longer listening for footsteps that carried hidden intent. The silence, once threatening, had become neutral, sometimes even kind. The trial moved faster than I had expected. Evidence has a way of cutting through lies with brutal efficiency. The recordings from the house, the footage from the warehouse, the financial trails Marcus had never bothered to hide because he believed he would never need to answer for them. The poisoned capsules, the messages, the men who had been hired and quickly turned cooperative when faced with real consequences. Each piece clicked into place with mechanical precision. I sat in the courtroom on the first day, my hands folded calmly in my lap, my posture straight. I did not wear black. I chose a soft gray dress, modest, unremarkable. I did not want to look like a victim, nor did I want to look like an avenger. I wanted to look like the truth. Marcus avoided my eyes entirely. When he did look up, it was with the hollow stare of a man who had already lost everything, but had not yet accepted it. Lily was worse. She watched me constantly, her gaze swinging wildly between hatred and pleading, as if she still believed I might stand up and save her simply because we shared blood. I did not. When the prosecutor spoke, there was no drama in his voice, no need for theatrics. The facts were enough. He laid them out one by one, a clean line from motive to intent to action. Greed, debt, betrayal, attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, forgery. Words that once felt abstract now belonged permanently to two people I had once trusted with my life. When it was my turn to testify, the courtroom grew still. I felt it, the collective attention, the expectation of tears or rage. I gave them neither. I spoke clearly, slowly. I described the night at the airport, the locked doors, the fear, the realization that the people closest to me had planned my death as if it were a business transaction. I described the poisoning attempt without embellishment. I spoke about the warehouse, the safe, the documents. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I simply told the truth. More than once, I saw jurors look away, shaken. Marcus's lawyer tried to frame him as desperate, manipulated, cornered by circumstances beyond his control. I listened without reacting. When it was over, I leaned forward slightly and said one sentence that settled heavily into the room. Desperation explains behavior. It does not justify it. That was all. The verdict came on the third day. Guilty, on all counts. Marcus collapsed into his chair as if his bones had given out. Lily screamed, a raw sound that cut through the courtroom before she was restrained. I felt no satisfaction watching it, only a quiet sense of finality. The judge's voice was firm, unyielding. The sentence was severe. Years measured in double digits. Facilities chosen for security, not comfort. There would be no quick return to normal life, no quiet deals, no appeals that mattered. When the gavel came down, it sounded less like an ending and more like a door closing. I walked out of the courthouse alone. The air outside felt different, lighter somehow. Reporters called my name. Cameras flashed. I did not stop. I had already said everything that mattered. In the weeks that followed, I turned inward. The house changed first. I repainted walls. I replaced furniture. I removed objects that carried memories I no longer needed to keep. I opened windows and let light flood rooms that had felt suffocating before. Slowly, the space stopped feeling like a crime scene and began to feel like a home again. I returned to the business my mother had built with a new clarity. For years, I had stayed on the margins, trusting others to handle what I was capable of understanding myself. That trust had been misplaced. I corrected it. With the help of advisors and attorneys, I reviewed contracts, traced decisions, identified people who had quietly benefited from Marcus's access. Some were dismissed, others resigned before they were asked to explain themselves. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten. I simply made it clear that transparency was no longer optional. To my own surprise, I thrived. Meetings no longer drained me. Decisions felt clean, grounded. I discovered a confidence I had never needed before, but which now felt natural. People began to listen differently. Not because I demanded it, but because I had earned it. Cole remained close through it all. He never hovered, never intruded. He was simply there when I needed him, steady and unassuming. Over time, his presence stopped feeling like protection and started feeling like family. One afternoon, as we walked through the renovated office space together, he paused and looked around. "Your mother would be proud," he said quietly. I smiled, the words settling gently into my chest. She prepared me better than I realized. The nightmares faded gradually, not all at once. Some nights I still woke with my heart racing, the echo of locked doors and flashing lights lingering at the edges of my mind, but they loosened their grip. Healing, I learned, is not dramatic. It is repetitive. It is choosing calm over fear again and again until fear grows tired of knocking. I began to speak publicly, not about the crime itself, but about recovery, about boundaries, about how easily love can be used as leverage if you are taught to give without question. Women approached me after events, their eyes bright with recognition. They told me pieces of their own stories. I listened. For the first time, my survival felt useful beyond myself. On a quiet morning near the end of that year, I stood in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, sunlight warming the counter. The house was silent in a way that felt peaceful, not empty. I realized then that I no longer measured time by before and after. The story had integrated into me. It no longer defined me. I picked up my phone and scrolled through a photo taken months earlier at the airport. The concrete column, the place where everything had almost ended. I did not feel fear when I looked at it, only gratitude. I set the phone down and took a slow breath. Justice had been served, not in a dramatic blaze, but in the steady restoration of truth and order. The people who tried to erase me no longer had access to my life, my body, or my future. And for the first time since that midnight ride, I felt something I had not allowed myself to feel. Freedom. Not loud, not triumphant, just real. I returned to the airport on a quiet morning, months after the night that almost ended everything. The terminal was brighter now, filled with ordinary sounds, rolling suitcases, murmured conversations, the soft echo of announcements overhead. Nothing about it looked dangerous anymore, yet my body remembered before my mind did. I walked slowly, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to feel every step. The concrete column stood exactly where it always had, unchanged, unremarkable. If someone passed it without knowing my story, they would see nothing more than part of the architecture. I stopped a few feet away and let my gaze rest on it. That was where I would have stepped out. That was where my life would have been taken from me quietly, efficiently, without witnesses. I closed my eyes for a moment and breathed. The memory no longer stabbed. It no longer made my chest tighten or my hands shake. It sat where it belonged now, in the past, a closed chapter that had already taught me everything it needed to teach. Behind me, a familiar voice spoke gently. "You don't have to stay here." I turned and smiled at Cole. He stood a respectful distance away, hands folded, the same calm presence he had always been. He wasn't here as a protector today. He was here as someone who mattered. "I know," I said. "I just wanted to see it one last time." He nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. This trip wasn't an escape. It wasn't a victory lap. It was something simpler and more meaningful. It was mine. We walked together toward the international departures area. My suitcase was small, light enough to roll easily beside me. I had packed carefully, intentionally. No excess, no clutter. Only what I needed. At the check-in counter, the agent smiled and asked for my passport. I handed it over without hesitation. When she stamped it and slid it back to me, the sound felt almost ceremonial. I was leaving not because I was running, but because I was choosing. As we waited near the gate, I watched people pass by, families, couples, solo travelers staring at their phones, everyone carrying their own unseen stories. I wondered how many of them had survived something that had changed the shape of their lives without leaving visible marks. Cole glanced at the boarding screen. "On time," he said. I nodded. "Of course it is." There was a time when delays and disruptions would have made me anxious, would have felt like signs that something was about to go wrong. Now, I trusted the quiet rhythm of things unfolding as they should. Before boarding began, Cole turned to me. "You'll be all right," he said, not as reassurance, but as a statement of fact. "I know," I replied. "And thank you. For everything." He looked away briefly, emotion flickering across his face before he mastered it. "Your mother asked me to watch over you," he said softly. "But you did the hardest part yourself." When they called my boarding group, I stood and adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder. I took one last look around the terminal, letting the scene imprint itself in a new way. Not as a place of danger, but as a place of passage. As I walked down the jet bridge, I felt something settle inside me with finality. The woman who had stepped into a rideshare car at midnight months ago, trusting and unaware, no longer existed. She hadn't been destroyed. She had been transformed. I took my seat by the window and fastened my seatbelt. Outside, the ground crew moved with practiced efficiency. The plane hummed beneath me, alive and ready. When the aircraft began to taxi, I rested my forehead lightly against the glass and allowed myself one small smile. I thought of the house I had reclaimed, filled with light and honesty. I thought of the work I was doing now, the people I had helped simply by telling the truth. I thought of the fear I no longer carried, the vigilance that had softened into wisdom instead of paranoia. Most of all, I thought of the moment I had chosen not to get out of the car. 5 minutes. That was all it took to redirect my entire life. The plane lifted smoothly into the air, the city shrinking beneath us, the lines of roads and buildings blurring into something abstract and distant. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. What waited ahead wasn't defined yet, and that was the point. For the first time, my future belonged only to me. And if you've stayed with me through this story, I want to ask you something gently and sincerely. Did any part of this resonate with you? Have you ever trusted someone who didn't deserve it? Or ignored a quiet warning inside yourself because it was easier to believe everything was fine? If so, you're not weak, you're human. And waking up doesn't mean you failed. It means you survived long enough to choose differently. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you're listening from, or share what part of the story stayed with you the most. Your words matter more than you might think. If this story moved you, please consider liking the video. It helps these stories reach others who may need them. And if you'd like to hear more real-life stories about resilience, justice, and quiet strength, don't forget to subscribe and stay with the channel. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving this story your time. Until the next one, take care of yourself, trust your instincts, and remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay where you are and listen.